really like Abby Phillip, right? I like her show on CNN. I like how she has different people on the panel with different perspectives. But I also feel that Abby can get in the way of herself by platforming certain people. We're going to watch two different clips, one with Karen Hunter, who I respect, and one with Joy Reid. Joy Reid more talked in a roundabout way, but Karen straight up asked, like, why do you platform people like Scott Jennings? Now, if you guys don't know who Scott Jennings is, he's usually the main one. He's the guy from, I think, Kentucky. He used to be a congressman, but he's MAGA, MAGA, MAGA 100%. Now, the thing is with Scott, he knows better, but he chooses not to do better. So let's go ahead and get into this clip right now, you guys. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
I could not have you on and not ask you or challenge you. We were just talking about platforming people. And I know you were on another interview and you said you make the decision about who's on the show. Right? You make the decision about the guests. And this WWE having people on both sides and things, I don't know how it serves us to have people who are gaslighting on a regular basis. And I'm talking specifically about Scott Jennings. Do you still feel that he's somebody that we need to hear from on a regular basis?
You know, I do. I mean, I think that I'm not sure. I think one of the things that's interesting is the way that he's really captured the attention and imagination of people who watch the show. But he is not the only MAGA Republican that we have on the show. We have MAGA Republicans on the show every day, and at least two of them on the show.
Notice Karen was like, I know. Like, she's like, yeah, that's my point. You have too many of them on the show.
Oh, and part of the reason that I think it is important for people to hear from him and also for him to be challenged, for us to have that kind of dialogue, is because that is about half the country that agrees with everything that he says. And I do think that it is important to just acknowledge that that is what half the country thinks, and they are a part of this system that we are in, and we have to engage with them. And I understand that there are many people who do not want to engage with people who they think are, coming at the conversations in bad faith or whatever, lying, whatever it is. I understand. I've heard it all. Trust me. Don't think I haven't heard it. But what I'm saying is that obviously the point of it is not just to let people just say things and it just goes out into the ether. He's in the context of a conversation in which there are several people at the table who can respond in real time, who can challenge in real time, who can put.
Drew did that head tilt like, huh? And I get what Abby is saying. Like, you want people from all different perspectives. You want to be able to have that dialogue because Scott does represent a portion of the country that thinks just like him, right? We can't deny that. Obviously, with the last election, not the one from last week, but I'm talking about 2024. Yeah, there's a lot of people who think his same way, right? However, I think it does a disservice when things aren't checked in real time. Like the way Abby is making it seem like, oh yeah, we're able to check it, right when it happens. And no, sometimes he'll say things and then there's a whole bunch of arguing and fighting. So the point of correcting him never gets through.
One thing up against another and have that actually responded to, because the alternative is also something that happens, which is that for a lot of the country, probably that half of the country, they're getting information just from people who agree with them, people on the right and people on the left. And the fact that that is the dominant way that people receive information, I do not think is good. I don't think it is good for Democrats to only hear from Democrats and for Republicans to only hear from Republicans. Because at the end of the day, this is a country in which we have to all live together, and politics is about persuasion. And if you cannot sit in front of somebody like Scott Jennings and persuade, or at least attempt to persuade them or make an argument that goes up against his, then I think that you are missing an opportunity to do what has to be done in a democracy, which is to convince people to your side of the facts. So that's my view on it. I understand that people disagree with it. I get it, and it's okay. But I also don't apologize for it, because if you are only talking to your people, you're not going to persuade anyone, and you're not going to win. That's how politics works.
Okay. All right. Abby Phillip. Newsnight with Abby Phillip on CNN.
Okay.
A dream.
So that was the end of that clip. And there's a longer interview. I'll go ahead and post a link after the show on that. But also, I want to go ahead and pull up this clip with Joy Reid where they go further into detail. But first, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll get right into it after the intro, even though we're 5 minutes into the video. You guys, here we go.
So this whole idea of holding attention and in some ways being performative about it, and I'm not just Jesse Jackson, but what you experience on a day-to-day basis at CNN. People come on to your show and they perform.
Some of them do. Yes.
Some of them do, right? And in some cases, you have people who really know their stuff and they're there to talk about something that's central to what their expertise is. And then you have other people who it isn't their expertise, but they're still performing. They're still performing for a partisan effect, right? How do you, just as a journalist, as somebody who has to navigate that table, how much credence do you give to the opinions of people who are far out of the pocket of what is even their expertise, but who are opining on your program to perform for a partisan effort?
You know, I look at it in kind of two separate ways. I think that there's some of that performance that you're talking about does happen. But I try to, I'm in a position where I can actually say, okay, now tell us what you really think. Because I do think that is part of my role, is to sort of be that voice for the people watching at home who are like, there's no way he really believes that, or there's no way she's really actually going to defend this thing. And so engaging with those moments directly and just sort of almost like breaking the third wall, where you're just sort of like, come on,
right?
Really?
How do you decide who gets to be at the table?
That's part of it. But okay, but here's the other part.
Okay.
And this is the other part. This speaks exactly to that. What I will say is that I actually don't think that the bar necessarily needs to only be credentialed expertise. Because guess what? Whether you are credentialed or not, you have a ballot in this country. And there are many regular people who are not experts in anything, who have opinions about things, and then they vote based on those opinions. So in a way, I actually welcome people who they're not Washington people, they're not political people, they don't have a degree in this or that, but they have viewpoints that reflect average Americans. And so there is a degree to which we actively seek out voices, some of whom are expertise, but some of whom are authentic to people who share their point of view, because that is also what I want represented at the table. Because I recognize that in this country, nobody is giving you, some kind of test in order to have a ballot.
I think one thing that they don't admit is that the YouTube style of doing politics actually works, as far as having people from a different side and different perspective, and people who are not necessarily politicians or people who are experts at a certain subject. They just are people with opinions, right? But in that comes this culture of the internet where, oh, did you hear what I say? Yeah, I own that person. Did you see? Oh, yeah, that liberal started crying. Oh, they came unhinged because I said this, and they can't handle facts. It's all about owning. Like, it seems like the basis of the show is, I don't want to say Abby is trying to be destructive. I don't want to say that, like, she's trying to put out misinformation or she's trying to damage the community. But I do feel like she does have a responsibility as far as, okay, you have a lot of performative people. Because granted or not, I know in the last video she said that she likes Scott and all this other stuff, but Scott is performative. Every clip that is on CNN, Scott puts on his Twitter and he's all like, yeah, they couldn't handle this and blah, blah, blah. You'll see if you go on Scott Jennings' Twitter, you'll see it. Like, his thing is about getting that sound bite, getting that click, so then people would, want to watch him. He's putting on a performance. So in that terms, I don't agree, but I do like how Abby has people of many different perspectives and different people on the show. Could they do better? Because I'm tired of seeing like Anna on there, Anna Kasparian. There's a few of them I'm tired of seeing. Like, get them off. Damn it.
You need to speak to those people too. That I think sometimes this sort of credentialed view of like, you can't speak unless you have a degree in political science is not a good reflection of where regular people are. I would actually like to have regular people at the table to express their views and to have those views debated, because that's part of what's happening in this country is that everybody is sort of saying, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't have that opinion. And people do have opinions that are based on their gut, based on what information they're receiving, which might not be complete. And I want to engage with those viewpoints because I know that millions of Americans out there have them.
So let me ask you, how do you decide who gets to be at your table? Because I mean, you have taken some criticism for like a Jillian Michaels opining about race, and she doesn't know anything about museums, et cetera. But how do you decide who gets to be at your table?
Listen, I think that there are people, like, I don't want to talk about Jillian Michaels because of course she thinks that I'm talking about her all the time. I'm asked about her. But this is perhaps something that she might like to hear. She represents a MAGA point of view. And she is an influential MAGA voice. And that's part of my point. You don't have to be credentialed in politics to have influence in that world, to have influence with our sitting president. Just think about that.
Which is actually frightening. I mean, because this is my question. And I think this is how I think it does tie to your book, right?
But do you see what I'm saying?
No, I totally see what you're saying.
In Trump, like I've been covering Trump since the 2016 election. And one,
I think what Joy was trying to get to before she got cut off was that you have somebody like that, Jillian Michaels, who doesn't know anything, doesn't know her right from her left. She needs to stick to fitness, which she's expertise at. But you have someone like Jillian Michaels who got roid rage, and you have her on the show just saying stupid stuff, especially about slavery. Like, did you know only this percentage? And it's all like, lady, you're taking that a minute point and spinning it to something that it was not. At the end of the day, still people own slaves, lady. Whatever 2% you want to say, that included people, that included the actual slaves, and that included people in the North who didn't have slaves. Of course, the percentage was lower when you put it like that and don't calculate just the South. But again, you have people like that who don't have any. And here's the thing, Jillian, when she was corrected, she wasn't trying to understand. She got more defensive. And so when you have somebody like that who is very reckless with their mouth, and with this whole media landscape, the right owns it. Not just YouTube and like social media, they own cable news as well too. Cable, all that. So at least we need the other side to be like, all right, we're going to make sure that we are only giving you the facts. We are giving you the hard-hitting facts, and this is what it is. Not that whole, oh, well, we want to hear everybody's opinion, because let's be honest, Julian's opinion was echoed by all those right-wing MAGA nuts. It was echoed. They felt the same way that she did. It wasn't like, oh, I corrected her and it changed their opinion and they learned. They're not coming on the show to learn anything. They think they're right.
The thing I know about covering Trump and his movement is that if you only look to the sort of, quote unquote, political voices, you would miss who is influencing him and who is setting the agenda. And part of what we have to do on the platform that I have is to basically say, okay, what's really going on in the country? What really is the direction that MAGA wants to take the country? And you cannot understand that without putting those voices in the conversation.
So let me ask you, is there a place where you're like, you know what, Jack Posobiec is too much for me? That is taking too far. That's the Pizzagate guy who gets on CNN. So absolutely, it's like, is there a point where you say this person is taking too far? They're too close to white nationalism. Absolutely. But he ends up on CNN. So I think that's what people go, I've never had your show. I've never had him on. Yeah. So I can't speak to that. Sure. And my understanding was that was in the context of a piece about Charlie Kirk, who was a good friend of his. Right. But we've never had him on. Yeah. We don't put on conspiracy theorists. We don't put on white supremacists, white nationalists. Look, obviously we have a vetting process, but I also think that we need to be real about who is influencing what in this country. You will miss the whole story if you don't understand who Trump is calling in the afternoons and talking to. And when people come on the show and they are Trump supporters, that is a viewpoint that we need at the table, because otherwise you're sort of like, you're shadowboxing. Who are you debating if you're not debating the actual other side?
So again, I know it's controversial. I know, trust me. I understand.
I'm sure
that.
you hear.
I understand it.
Yeah.
I understand it. But I also think, look, we all have different roles. And where I am and where CNN is media ecosystem is different from other outlets. And we all sides of the political spectrum just to say that we're doing it. But it's from a genuine belief that we want to reflect what is actually the political conversation in the country. And if we only had a conversation at our table between Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans, that would be a completely false representation of the political dynamic in this country. But that also includes that, I've had people on who've said, they're actually establishment Republicans, but they support Trump. And then all of a sudden it'll come up.
Scott Jennings.
Well, no, not even him. No, I'm not even talking about him. I'm talking about other people. And then all of a sudden it'll be like, well, there was cheating in the 2020 election. And I have to be, wait, hold up.
Right. You have to fact check, because that is, I think, the thing is you have to fact check it.
But again.
And I think, Abby will question them, but sometimes she doesn't always say like, oh, well, this is the actual fact. Just like the slavery thing with Jillian Michaels, that actually did go unchecked. Like, they didn't put out the fact that, oh, well, that number includes the North and also the slaves and people who didn't own slaves. Like, that's what that number included when she said only 2% of people had slaves. Not taking into the account, that's where all the slaves were, right? But again, that wasn't fact checked like that. It was more questioned, but it wasn't well, here's the actual facts. Now, I know CNN got the money to have fact checkers. I mean, even if Abby has a phone and she can Google it real quick or something, and they actually put up on the screen, this is the actual fact. This is what it is. And I think in real time, because again, they're a corporation, they have the money and the funding to fact check in real time. It's not something like you have to research or anything. They have fact checkers there. Now, if that was being done, I think that would be a healthier debate, because at least people will get the information correct. And again, most of the stuff that will circulate is the BS online, because again, we all like it messy. We all like the clickbaitable headlines. We don't take into the account the facts. And I think that's what's missing from the show.
We know that 35 to 40% of Republican voters believe Trump when he says the election is stolen. Yeah. And so we are not selecting for election deniers, and we don't tolerate election denying at the table. But just know that there's more than a quarter of the country that has those viewpoints, or even if they agree that Joe Biden won, they'll still say oh, there was cheating, with a caveat that there was cheating. All of that gets checked and corrected at the table. But even when we don't know that that's their viewpoint, sometimes it comes up and we're like, wait, whoa. Yeah. But guess what? That is this great country that we are in. Well, they are here, they are voting, and we have to address that head on.
Right. And how do you, so talk to me a little bit about just your take as how journalism is managing this world in which, as you said, you have large percentages of people who believe completely false things. Yeah. And who believe with their full chest, and they believe it, and it's very hard to talk them down from it. And as you said, you put them on the table, they're just going to say the election was stolen. There's nothing you can do. How is journalism helping? And is just having the conversation with somebody who has these beliefs, does it help? In the end, do you walk away from it saying this is advancing the cause of us getting back to a common set of facts or not?
Yeah, look, I think that we are in this insanely siloed media ecosystem.
And there should be.
You definitively state that they're not being properly trained. You know that?
Because they're shooting dogs. They're shooting dogs in people's that have been locked in people's bathrooms. They're abandoning small children alone in cars while they. No, it's not false. Look it up. Don't just say false. I actually
abandoning small children. They turned the children over to HHS.
There were actually small children abandoned in a highway in a car in Cicero, Illinois.
How much more specific
would you like me to get?
They're not training ICE.
With examples of what is happening.
Of course, they're training them.
Well, look, Scott, she had a specific example where conservatives are living in a completely different information world.
I like Anna Navarro.
Absolutely.
Than liberals. And breaking that down needs to be done. Because when you don't ever even hear the facts, it's hard to even know that you're wrong. And that happens a lot. I mean, half my job sometimes is knowing what the latest conspiracy is, so that if it comes up, I'm ready to address it. Because it happens a lot where people don't even know that what they're saying or what they've seen and believe is not true. And so that happens a lot. And I don't come away from that saying, what's the point of this? People are just saying false things. I think that one time that person brings up something that is debunked and false, and I debunk it at the table might be the very first time that
So they've
someone
heard it.
out there has heard an
Right.
alternative point of view. And so again, the siloing of our information landscapes is one of the biggest problems in media today. And it is not going to resolve all of our political problems or differences, but less siloing is better than more.
And do you
That's my view of it.
I hear that absolutely. Do you trust that when people are coming to your table that they are genuinely, if they're wrong, they're just genuinely wrong, and that they're not performing for an audience of one and saying things they don't even believe
Some
because they're
people
trying to
are performing,
yeah,
for an audience of one, and I will call them out on it. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
I will. The nature of the show is that we have the ability to call people out on the BS, and it happens. And sometimes it's me, sometimes it's other people, other panelists that do it. But I also think that there are a lot of people who come on, and those are actually truly their deeply held beliefs, and some of it is because they've never heard otherwise.
Right.
They've literally never heard otherwise.
I want to take this back to what you wrote here because
yeah. So again, I'm a fan of Abby Phillip, right? But I think also too, there's a responsibility with somebody in her position, especially with her being the only. I think now she's the only Black woman in late night as far as news, right? Yeah, she is. So there's a lot on her plate, right? But if there was some way where the truth actually was spread and not just the performative clickbait shit, it would be perfect, And maybe she'll get there because when Abby started doing that show, I was like, oh, get her off. Like, I don't know if it was just me. I was like, get her off. She is too weak. She too, too frail. Like, oh, I don't know. And like, you could tell like she was uncomfortable. She wasn't comfortable in herself. I think she actually took over Don Lemon's spot, actually, now I think about it. But, you could tell she was uncomfortable. She was scared to like jump in when they were going at it. And like now she's finally became like comfortable. She's in her bag now. So I have to give her credit. But I think there's just improvements that can be made to the show. Like, again, I agree with having people from different sides of the political spectrum, also having everyday people. Hopefully one day I get to be on the show speaking into existence. But we need to make sure that the actual facts are getting out there in some way that inserts it into the show to where that will be echoed and not just the lies and the performative shit that we see on the show, But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'll definitely like to hear from you guys. Please go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to y'all later. Deuces, everybody.